As we begin tonight's program, please direct your attention to the door to my left for the official welcoming of our honored guest, His Excellency Ambassador Andriy Shevchenko, the Ambassador of Ukraine to Canada, and the Ukrainian Canadian Congress National President Pavlo Grod. Leading the Privyet with the traditional Ukrainian kolach welcome are from the Ukrainian Canadian Congress Alberta Provincial Council, Olesa Andriovich, President, and Moussienko, Board of Director. Конгрес українців Канади разом з Провінційної ради Альберти вітає вас на цю святкову імпрезу з нагоди 75-річчя заснування Конгресу українців Канади. Також ми надзвичайно раді, що разом з присутнім з нами є посол України в Канаді Андрій Шевченко. Мене звати Данило Мoussienko, і я маю велику честь бути вашим ведучим сьогоднішньої програми. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Danilo Moussienko, and I have the absolute honor to be your MC for this evening. Tonight, the Ukrainian Canadian Congress National Executive, in partnership with its Alberta Provincial Council and its Board of Directors, is pleased to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress. We are deeply honored to have two leaders to celebrate this important milestone with us, including His Excellency, the Ambassador of Ukraine to Canada, Andriy Shevchenko, and the Ukrainian Canadian Congress National President, Pavlo Grod. I would now like to call upon the President of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress Alberta Provincial Council, Olesa Andriovich, to provide greetings and to formally introduce Pavlo Grod.
Reverend Fathers, Your Excellency Ambassador Shevchenko, Ukrainian Canadian Congress President, my boss, Pavlo Grod, the 1.2 million strong Ukrainians in Canada and over 350,000 Ukrainians in Alberta, we are well represented by the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, or UCC, and its constituent organization. We take pride in the significant accomplishments of this coordinating body through its 75-year history. There are few organizations that actually managed to survive the test of time, but the very few prove even capable not only of withstanding the test of time, but in fact adapting, growing, and flourishing under inevitable pressures of change and influences of national policy and challenges of a complex and fragile international environment. The Congress has never been content with the status quo. The UCC has always risen to the challenges, focusing on building a strong, cohesive, effective community for the benefit of local, provincial, and national priorities. UCC has become an authoritarian representative body recognized and respected within Parliament, boardrooms, government agencies, and non-government organizations in the Canadian mainstream. The Congress showcases and represents the Ukrainian community in Canada, highlighting its history, culture, its people as nation builders, and contributes to the development of multicultural Canada. One of the defining factors in the work of UCC is the community relationship with Ukraine and its people. Our linkages with Ukraine define who we are as a community and as a stronger Ukrainian nation within Ukraine. The stronger we become here, the stronger the entire Ukrainian diaspora throughout the world becomes. Their opportunities of mutual benefit are limitless. And as such, UCC has made one of the priorities in assisting the people of Ukraine in realizing their aspirations for a life in freedom and dignity, in a state where fundamental human rights are respected and the rule of law prevails. The current situation in Ukraine has thrust UCC into the limelight and onto the international stage. The UCC has effectively engaged Canada in staunch support of Ukraine, and as such, as prominent members of the Ukrainian World Congress, we have engaged world and opinion leaders, including those of the United States and the European Union, in recognizing that every real threat posed by the Russia to global peace and security. We are very honored to have you, Excellency, the Ambassador of Ukraine to Canada, to be with us today. Your presence underscores the significance of the relationship between Ukrainians in Canada and the diaspora. Ukrainians in Canada as well as the diaspora throughout with the people of Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, we have gathered here to celebrate. We recognize and remember the past and honor those who have paved the way for this milestone of UCC's history and the opportunities we look forward to. But the future is dependent upon the present and the seeds that we continue to sow today. Since 2007, Paul has been the national president, and he's coordinated and represented the interest of all of us. He has also become the vice president of the World Congress. He has led several international election observations to Ukraine and has taken up in his free time, somehow, in the last year, writing journal articles as well in the Kyiv Post and the Embassy News in Ottawa. He has visited Ukraine numerous times and met with leading Ukrainian politicians such as President Petro Poroshenko, former Minister Andriy Yatsenyuk, and Yulia Tymoshenko. He's accompanied former Prime Minister Stephen Harper and Foreign Minister John Bair's delegations to Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our President, Paul Grod.
Thank you very much, Olesia. Dear members of Parliament, dear members of the Legislative Assembly of Alberta, dear aldermen, Ambassador Moussienko, dear community leaders, dear friends, good evening. It's a privilege to be here. First of all these accolades, they trust me, they don't go to my head because I'm going to be home in Toronto on Tuesday. And my wife will say, "Okay, Mr. President, you got to fix the shower head. You've got to take the garbage out, and don't forget to pick up your socks." So trust me, this does not go to my head. That's actually maybe one of the reasons why I do so much traveling with the community, because I actually feel appreciated when I travel. So thank you very much for those very kind introductory words. I feel very much at home here in Calgary. I've been coming here as a student, being involved with the Ukrainian Students Association here, and traveling here very frequently. I fell in love with Calgary so much that we decided as a company that we needed to have a business here. So a year and a half ago, Rodan Energy expanded into Alberta, so we're very pleased to be an Alberta company as well. But as well, the Calgary community is very strong and vibrant. And many of my friends here have been very key advocates for our community here in Calgary. The last 2 or 3 years, I've been being brought out with our community to participate in a number of various prominent events, including Prime Minister Harper's barbecue. Last year, a number of us were here this summer at that barbecue. And I still recall the story where we're actually in the front row because the Ukrainians, for some reason, were able to get the best seats in the house at the Prime Minister's barbecue. And the Prime Minister's walking onto stage, and he's about to start playing because, as we all know, Prime Minister Harper's a musician. And he says, we're going to play some good old tunes. And one of us from our table yells up, "Do you take requests?" And he looks over at a table, and he obviously recognizes who's there, and he says, "I'm sorry, I don't know any Ukrainian folk songs." And that's just a kind of a testament to how the Calgary Ukrainian community has been influential, because it's a relatively, what I'll say, it's a community that is, I would say, understated. But that understatement is very important because the politicians in this city and the politicians in this province understand the influence and the activity of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, the Ukrainian Professional Business Association, and the Ukrainian community here. And I think by the active participation of our elected officials here in tonight's event, it's a testament to the Calgary Ukrainian community and to the Alberta Ukrainian community. So for that, I want to thank you. We're celebrating a real milestone, And earlier today was mentioned that I was recognized as one of the top 80 most influential people influencing Canada's global future, and also someone who was sanctioned from a persona non grata to Russia. But that really, quite frankly, friends, is not me. That is all of us here. I mean, the reason why my name is on those lists is not because of who I am, it's because of who all of you are. And that's really the message that I wanted to bring here today is we have a strong community because of all of you. We are influential because of all of you. I was just in Ottawa this past week where I met with several ministers, foreign minister, defense minister, public safety minister, prime minister's foreign policy advisor, leaders of the opposition parties. And the doors open up for me when I go to Ottawa for one simple reason, and that's because of all of you. Because we have a strong, vibrant, and well-organized, conscientious Ukrainian-Canadian community that has been active in this country for the last 125 years, that has been that community we consider ourselves a founding peoples of this country. That is the reason why I'm able to go to Ottawa and represent our community. And that's why in this 75th anniversary of the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress, it's important for us to understand that unity that the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress brought to our community 75 years ago continues to play a very, very important role. The fact that politicians do listen to us, and the fact that they are so engaged in Ukraine, the fact that 2 years ago Prime Minister Harper played a very important role in ensuring that Russia was thrown out of the G8, was not really because of look, there was a lot of principles behind it, but it's because the fact that we were an active community. The fact that we educated our members of parliament and our ministers and our prime ministers on issues that are important to our community, whether they were Holodomor, whether it was recognizing the internment operations during the First World War, or it was ensuring that Canada became a top foreign policy priority of Canada. That was all because of us. And we should be very proud of that. We should also reflect on the fact that that takes a lot of hard work. And that's why I really want to today recognize those volunteers, those people, most of you, all of you in this room, that are contributing on a daily basis. Whether it's working with youth, whether it's working with SUM or with PLAST, and ensuring we have a conscientious Ukrainian-Canadian community. Whether it's those that are involved with organizing festivals or organizing various protests or various actions that raise that conscientiousness. It's all because of you that we are able to help Ukraine today and influence Canada. We have three major milestones this year. Mentioned 75th anniversary of the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress, the 125th anniversary of the first Ukrainian immigrants to Canada, and of course, this year is the 25th anniversary of Ukraine's independence. And that 25th anniversary is something that is, I would say today for us, relatively bittersweet. I think it's a historical milestone because it's been hundreds of years since Ukraine has had 25 years of independence. But we can't take that for granted. And I think we've realized that 2 years ago, that Ukraine's independence cannot be taken for granted. And as a community here, we need to continue to stand up for Ukraine. Ukraine's had many challenges. It went through a revolution of dignity 2 years ago, where they overthrew a ruthless authoritarian dictator that was taking Ukraine back to a kleptocratic authoritarian government, which Vladimir Putin's trying to reestablish, through to a very cynical war, the invasion of Russia into Ukraine. And just to be clear, ladies and gentlemen, we all know that there's never been a separatist movement in Ukraine. Up until 2 years ago, there was never a separatist flag. The Donetsk Republic was not even thought of other than in the halls of the Kremlin as they were strategizing over this. It was only 2 years ago that this war in Ukraine and Eastern Ukraine was engineered by Vladimir Putin, and we have to call a spade a spade. And we will be demanding from our leaders in Canada and in the international community to stand behind Ukraine. It really is in Canada's national interest to stand up for Ukraine, because we also have common borders with Russia. And if Canada continues to stand up for Ukraine and resist Russian aggression in Ukraine, it's only then will Russia understand that Canada will not be a pushover, and that Canada's Arctic sovereignty will be protected as a result of that. So ladies and gentlemen, today Ukraine is going through very difficult times. It's not easy to turn a ship as large as Ukraine, and we have to be very cognizant of the fact that Ukraine is going through a very positive reform movement, while at the same time fighting a war, an active war on its eastern front. In fact, those of you who get the Ukrainian Canadian Congress's daily briefing, you'll know that in the last month, there have been 16 Ukrainian soldiers that have been killed and dozens of others that have been wounded as a result of continuous artillery attacks by the Russian Federation on Ukrainian territory. So let's not mix words. Let's be very clear. There is a war in Ukraine. Russia has invaded Ukraine. We need to stand up for Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have a wonderful opportunity to celebrate. Despite the challenges that we have in Ukraine, we have to also recognize that Ukraine today is a very different country than it was 2 years ago. Today, Ukraine is united more than it ever was, and we, as Ukrainian Canadians, have a very strong role to play to ensure that Ukraine becomes that independent country that respects the human dignity of its people, that country that our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents dreamed of. And we have a very important obligation. I call on everybody in this room, whether you're Ukrainian Canadian, whether you're elected member of parliament, whether you like the Ukrainian Canadian people, really today is an important day that we can all stand together. And on this very, very important and venerable celebration we have here today, the 75th anniversary of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, the 125th anniversary of the first Ukrainian immigrants, and the 25th anniversary of Ukraine's independence, I call on all of you to really come together. We need you more than ever. We need you to be engaged. We need you to be involved. And I want to thank you for your tremendous contribution that you've made to the Ukrainian Canadian community. On that note, I want to wish you all a wonderful celebration. Slava Kanadi, Slava Ukraini.
We will now be moving on to the speeches by the various levels of government. First, we were very honored to have with us member of the Legislative Assembly of Alberta and the leader of the Alberta Party, Honorable Greg Clark. Mr. Clark was born and raised in Calgary, Alberta, but graduated in 1993 from the University of Victoria. He later moved to Alberta and ended up working with Lawrence Decore, who was the leader of the official opposition of Alberta Liberals. Deciding to leave politics for a time, Clark earned an MBA and in 2006 co-founded an information technology consulting firm, C3 Associates. He has engaged in volunteer work, most notably as vice chair of Distress Center in Calgary, and he co-founded the Calgary River Communities Action Group in response to the 2013 Alberta floods. In 2013, Clark sold his shares of C3 to his partners to enter politics full-time. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Clark.
Thank you very much. What you didn't say in that is that I'm also a proud Ukrainian Canadian. And of course, Clark not being a traditional Ukrainian name, you probably all figured out that my mother, who's a Warnica, was actually born in southeastern Saskatchewan, and as a proud Ukrainian Canadian, it's just such an honor to have Ambassador Moussienko here with us, President Grod, and all distinguished guests. I want to bring greetings on behalf of all of my colleagues from all parties at the Legislative Assembly of Alberta. What I see when I look out across the room is I see a lot of familiar faces. People I've met before, but even those I haven't met, I sense a common bond. And when I reflect on what Ukrainian Canadians have contributed to our country, I think of the story of my grandparents and of my mother's family, who came in 1928 from Ukraine. My uncle, who's 92 years old, still with us, he remembers. He was 4 years old when he took that journey. And he remembers being on the ox cart from Ukraine to the coast. He remembers getting in the ship, which is the biggest thing he'd ever seen in his life. He remembers getting on the train in Quebec City and taking days and days and days and days to get across the country and finally getting off in Saskatchewan and to build their own farm. And they did that, and that farm is still there, and it's still in our family. And that is not an unusual story. In fact, that's the typical story. That's who we are. That's how we've built this country and how we continue to build this country. And I'm just fiercely proud to be here with you as a Ukrainian Canadian. I do need to have more discussions with my mother because my Ukrainian is non-existent, and I apologize. So my promise to you is next time I come back, you're going to hear me say something much more profound in Ukrainian. And anyone who wants to give me a hand with that, please, I'd like your help. So thank you again. It really is an honor to be here, and I look forward to speaking with many of you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are also honored to welcome another member of the Legislative Assembly for Calgary McKay, Nose Hill, Karen McPherson, to come up and speak on behalf of Alberta's NDP government. Please welcome Ms. McPherson.
Good evening, Ambassador Moussienko, MP Kmick, I hope I pronounced that properly, MLA Clark, Councillor Chu, President Grodd, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Premier Rachel Notley and all of my caucus colleagues, it's my pleasure to bring greetings here this evening, and I'd like to acknowledge that we meet here tonight on traditional Treaty 7 territory. It is a real pleasure to salute the Ukrainian Canadian Congress on your remarkable milestone. Alberta is a place that has been shaped by the lives and stories of people from all over the planet. What brought people here well before Alberta became a province was their optimism and a belief in a better future. People wonder about newcomers to our province, about what they will bring to us and what their presence will mean. And we can answer that by thinking about the Ukrainian community that first began its journey to Alberta 125 years ago. Men, women, and families eager for a chance to prove their worth on their own piece of land. Whole rural communities crossing an ocean with a solid faith that the future had something special in store for them. The burdens they faced of adjusting to a new home, a sometimes very harsh climate, and learning a new language. The uphill battle for acceptance in a country that was often suspicious. And the very hard work that greeted them every single day in order to succeed. We can see what became of them and what became of Alberta thanks to their efforts. Today, Alberta has become the welcoming land that they dreamed of. A land where we celebrate diversity and embrace the cultural gifts of every community, where we can revere the culture of our beginnings and do so fully and completely as Albertans and Canadians. The success of Alberta's Ukrainian community is a great lesson for all those who come here seeking a better life, and to those of us who welcome them. Those pioneers had a proud heritage to look back on, yet they never stopped looking forward. As we gather here tonight, we have the honor of remembering their journey, and we cherish, we cherish the gift they gave us of our own future. And so, on behalf of the Government of Alberta, it's my pleasure to congratulate the Ukrainian Canadian Congress on the celebration of 75 years as a national organization, and to say thank you to the Ukrainian people for everything they have done, all that they have contributed in the past 125 years to build our province and our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to some traditional Ukrainian performances, the Kurinya Ukrainian Folk Ensemble has been entertaining Calgary's Ukrainian community since 1993. They have performed across Western Canada, as well as San Diego, California. Their repertoire consists of traditional Ukrainian folk music, sung both a cappella and with traditional Ukrainian instruments. The musical director, Irina Kalinovich, was born in Lviv and comes from an extensive background in both voice and instrumentation. She completed her formal musical education at Lviv's National Music Academy. She is an incredible bandura player and even better musical director. Irina is also the musical director of Surma Assumption Church Choir. You have already heard Kurinya today singing the national anthems. Kurinya will now perform one song, Їхали козаченьки.
Їхали козаченьки степом долиною, там зустріли дівчиноньку з русою косою. Обсається до поля, всається за плечами. Поїхали дівчинонько з нами козаками. Обсається до поля, всається свого подвиг не забуду. Остається до пояса, в'ється за плечами, поїхали дівчинонько з нами козаками. Остається до пояса, в'ється за плечами, поїхали дівчинонько з нами козаками. Прийде мій коханий до рідної хати, там зустріну його я, щирая мати, там зустріну його я, щиро усміхнуся, добрий матері старий, низько поклонюся, косається до пояса, в'ється за плечами, поїхали дівчинонько з нами козаками. Косається до пояса, в'ється за плечами, поїхали дівчинонько з нами козаками. Їхали козаченьки степом долиною, там зустрілись дівчинонько з